Have you got any advice specific to students and researchers approaching writing their first dissertation or journal article? What tends to go wrong, and what tips can you share to help combat that?
So what really tends to go wrong with these is people not understanding how to structure them. And it can get very frustrating when you're trying to write and you don't really know where your information goes. So if you were to visualize a journal article in terms of the scope of information throughout, it would look like an hourglass. So it begins with a wide scope and it broadens out at the bottom and narrowing in the middle. So it begins with a wide scope with the introduction, then it narrows down to the specific information about your study. The narrowest section is going to be your methods and your results, and then it will broaden out again into the discussion, conclusion, and future directions. So think about that shape when you're writing your paper. Your introduction starts broad, it establishes the field of research and what's known about it. Then the narrowing begins as you communicate the knowledge gap and your questions. The narrative will narrow further as you explain your specific study purpose, your main findings, the significance and innovation of your work. The methodology should be really specific and concise, and you should include sufficient information for another researcher to replicate that study. Now, this is one thing that I see a lot that's very annoying. If you are referencing methods that have been previously used, if a person would have to go back through 6 papers worth of method sections to find that full description of that method, please provide more detail than simply saying as previously described. Or cite the paper that has the method in it, not the 5 ones after it that also said as previously described. The results section then should clearly state the findings with no discussion. Commentary belongs in the discussion section. Make sure that it is clear in the results section why you did the experiment and what it shows, but without including too much introduction material either. After you've described your results, your scope is going to broaden again throughout the discussion section, but start with the narrowest topic, your study findings, what the outcomes were, and what those outcomes tell us. Then branch out into contextualizing those findings within the field. Analyze them and their implications in the context of the literature, and explain how they align with or contradict with previous findings and what the implications of that are. Finally, state the project limitations. All projects have them. It's not a bad thing. It's best to recognize them because then you can bring in options for addressing those limitations in your future directions section. And that should also include recommendations for where people could take your work in the future. And then finally, provide a concise conclusion that states the purpose, key findings, and implications of your study. That's a really good framework. If you want to put that down in an outline, if you're struggling with your structure, and then figure out where the pieces that you've written already fit in with that, that can help you build that first paper.